Faraday's law says that the amount of a substance produced or consumed at an electrode during electrolysis is directly proportional to the amount of electricity that passed through. Of course, that makes sense, right? The more electricity you're passing through, that's more electrons. More electrons means more reaction, right? So unit of current, as we said before, is an ampere. Is a coulomb per second. An ampere is 1 coulomb per second. And if you recall, the Faraday, we said, is 96,400 coulombs per mole of electron, okay? 96,500. The more precise number is 96,485 if you want more sig figs, okay? So let's apply that to this question right here. How much copper will plate at an electrode if your copper sulfate, you do an electrolysis of copper sulfate, okay? And you carry it out with a 1 amp current for 1 hour. So if you want copper to plate from copper sulfate, what's the half reaction here? Copper ions plus 2 electrons will give you copper, right? That's what you need to accomplish. So how much of the copper can you make to plate at an electrode if you do this experiment using a 1 amp current for 1 hour? Well, 1 amp is a coulomb per second, right? And you can see how many moles of electrons you have, how many coulombs you have per mole of electrons. So you can figure out how many electrons you have. Once you figured out how many electrons you have, you just divide that by 2. That gives you moles of copper, right? So let's do that. You're going to say, okay, moles of electrons would be equal to 1.00 amp is a coulomb per second. Okay, for 1 hour. This is in 1 hour. So 1 coulomb every second times 60 seconds in 1 minute times what? 60 minutes in an hour. Right? And it cancels out, seconds cancels out. How do you convert coulombs to moles of electrons? Use the Faraday constant. 1 mole of electron is how many coulombs? 96,485 coulombs, right? So coulombs cancels out. So that calculates moles of electrons. That would be how much? 60 times 60 divided by 96,485. Okay. So that was how much? 0.0373. 0.0373 moles of electrons. Moles of electrons per hour. Okay? And if we're doing 1 hour, then that is the moles of electrons. So that's per hour times 1 hour. So that gives you moles of electrons. So how do you calculate how much copper? 0.0373 moles of electrons. What's the relationship between moles electrons and moles copper? 2:1, right? 2 moles electrons per mole of copper. So 1 mole of copper is made every time you lose 2 moles of electrons. You use up 2 moles of electrons. That cancels out. So that gives you how much? 0.0373 divided by 2. 0.0187 moles of copper. And how many grams is that? What's the molar mass of copper? 63.55 grams per mole of copper. cancel it out. That gives you 0.0187 times 63.55, 1.18 grams of copper. Is that right? 63.55 times 0.0187, yeah, 1.19. That's how much copper you're going to plate.